Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us. James, over to you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, From Data to Decisions, Leveraging AI for Mission Impact, hosted by Leadership Connect in partnership with Denodo. My name is James McKenna. I serve as Vice President here at Leadership Connect. As federal agencies dive deeper into 2026, the pressure to turn vast amount of data into timely, mission-driven decisions continues to grow. Leaders are managing increasingly complex programs, tighter budgets, and really rising expectations for transparency and really measurable outcomes. Obviously, AI, artificial intelligence, is shifting that equation. AI is helping agencies move from information overload to real-time actionable insights. And it's proven that when implemented effectively, these tools are really enabling faster analysis, smarter prioritization, more informed decision-making across government environments. So in today's webinar, we'll discuss how AI is transforming data into action across government, what practical applications are delivering measurable value today, and how the evolving role of industry is in helping with deployment and scaling of AI solutions, and really how leaders can deploy these capabilities responsibly and strategically. Before we begin, there are a few housekeeping items that I need to share. So Leadership Connect, we are registered with the National Association of State Boards and Accountancy, which is the NASBA, as a sponsor of continuing professional education. So today's webinar is eligible for 1 CPE credit in the information technology field of study. In order to receive that credit, please be sure to respond to all 3 polling questions that will drop throughout today's session. So throughout the session today, we'll drop a few polling questions for the audience to answer. So please do so in order to receive those CPE credits. There's also an area to drop questions into. Feel free to submit questions whenever you'd like during the webinar. We'll try to address those at the end, and if we're unable to at the end, we'll try to share them with the speakers afterwards and try to answer them as best we can. But now, my pleasure to introduce our panelists and speakers for today. So I'll start off with Colonel Carl Bottleson, if you don't mind a quick introduction for the audience.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Hey, Colonel Carl Bottleson. I'm the Deputy Director for Cyber Warfare at the Department of War, Office of Undersecretary of War for Acquisition and Sustainment. I've been in for about 25 years now. I have a history within the United States Space Force and the Air Force before that, operating intercontinental ballistic missiles, the Space Surveillance Network, and quite a bit of work in policy, in space policy primarily. So happy to be here and look forward to the conversation.
Thanks. And over to Jesse Isaacman-Beck, please.
Off mute. Good to meet you all. Good afternoon. My name is Jesse Isaacman-Beck. I am the Director of the Division of AI Policy and Strategy in the Office of the Chief Artificial Intelligence Officer at HHS. I have a background in biomedical research. I spent a lot of time in academic research in neuroscience and then pivoted over to work on policy at the National Institutes of Health. Got very excited about and interested in emerging technologies such as AI and started to work towards development of AI strategy both for NIH and the Department of Health and Human Services overall, and recently pivoted into this current position where I've continued along those lines, thinking about policy and strategy for AI for healthcare and human services delivery. Thank you, James.
Thanks, Jesse. And over to Peter Niesewitz.
Hi, everyone. Peter Niesewitz. I'm a data scientist, a senior specialist at the United States Postal Service Office of Inspector General. So we are the OIG, or the Investigations and Audit Agency for the Postal Service. I am in the Research and Insight Solution Center, RISC. So that's our analytics and research shop within the USPS OIG. And my background is I have a kind of a wide government background with having been with the judiciary before, so the U.S. Administrative Office of the U.S. Courts, as well as HHS as well. at ACF, and as well as other interagency work before that. So my background was more legal, but actually over the last 10 or so years, it's been much more into data and analytics, and specifically AI. How can we use, you know, data science and also computer programming and IT, to enable AI solutions. So that's really been my focus. Thank you.
Thanks, Peter. And last but not least, Terry Dorsey from Denodo.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Terry Dorsey. I am the Senior Data Architect and Evangelist for North America at Denodo Corporation. I come there with over 40 years of experience in industry across a wide variety of verticals, from defense contracting through consumer goods, manufacturing, and healthcare. My experience is fairly broad, across the amount of time I've been in industry, but anywhere from application development through analytics, business intelligence, and more recently, the implementation of artificial intelligence projects, and working with customers and different levels of organizations in order to help them position themselves to take advantage of artificial intelligence. Thank you.
Thanks, Terry. And to kind of jump into the topic for today, data to decisions, right? Still difficult in government and many places. But right now, agencies have more data than ever, right? So to kind of start with an open question for the group, and we can start with Colonel Bottleson. Why are we still struggling, or what are the biggest barriers you're seeing that are leading to people struggle to convert all this data into real operational decisions?
I think one of the things that's going to come up pretty frequently throughout this is an ability to trust the information that we're getting out of artificial intelligence. I think, culturally, if we look through, especially media, it hasn't exactly painted artificial intelligence in a good light in the past. And so I think it's going to come down to a number of trusting applications and a trust but verify type of approach before people are really truly going to adopt it. And I think it's also one of those things that a lot of people just don't have a whole lot of education on how to leverage it. I mean, myself being one of them included, is I'm not a computer programmer by trade, so even trying to go on to AI and get it to do what I want it to do, there's a pretty steep learning curve that without some kind of formal training or at least some testing out and trying it is you're going to have a difficulty with doing that.
Thanks. And Jesse, same question over to you. What are kind of the most common blockers you're seeing?
Yeah, I think a big challenge is decentralization. In a given organization, I think a big challenge is data management and sharing, and just understanding how crisp and high quality data need to be in order to, one, make them interoperable, and two, enable them to be AI ready and ingested by these models for the outcomes we're seeking. So what I see at HHS is greater than probably a dozen divisions who all have different methods for how they store and tag their data, and then for where and when they're willing to share. And on top of that, there's the piece about what can you share given the law, and how do you share securely. So those are my thoughts on that.
Great, thanks. And Peter, same over to you in this kind of opening statement, but we're certainly going to dive into all these comments in more detail throughout it, as mentioned.
Sure. Yeah. So a lot of it resonates a lot, Colonel and Jesse, what you said, about trust, and then also about the data fragmentation. What's interesting on the data fragmentation, I would say that it's a little bit of a paradox, right? Because in some ways we have more data than ever, but in other ways it's more fragmented than ever. And the reason why is, we work, almost any agency I think works with, many vendors. The data is stored in multiple places in different formats. The rules around access are not always clear. Sometimes there's governance issues that come up. But what I would say is really what we deal with a lot in the Postal Service Office of Inspector General is we have we oversee a huge agency, which is the Postal Service. That itself has hundreds of petabytes of data, and you can imagine all sorts of, data from where the vehicles are to who the employees are, right? And we don't always get access to that, even as the OIG. It requires a lot of kind of back and forth. Not just sort of on the leadership side, but also even on the technical side to really understand what data is needed. So that's one is kind of internal agency data, but then just the variety of tools that investigators and auditors use. You can imagine, all sorts of very specialized tools, and it's great to have all of this technology. The downside is that they tend to be fragmented. So really being able to connect, your kind of core business or operational data with, outside tools that you might be using, that's a challenge that we've been facing quite a bit.
Thanks, Peter. Terry, same question over to you, and coming from a slightly different perspective, but what are you seeing within your government customer base?
Yeah, I mean it's a lot of what is said here is very true. I want to add just one other perspective here. It's like so many organizations, government included, have been implementing AI in the form of machine learning things for quite some time, and I think a lot of companies have gotten used to what that looks like. With the advent of generative AI, I think it's the game has changed in that how we present information to models that we don't create brings a whole plethora of different types of problems, right? It's this idea of trying to now leverage natural language, which is not as deterministic as the way we would present information to models before. So how we position ourselves as far as architecture around data modeling and how we present it and secure it, it becomes even more critical. The idea that information is so scattered about and fragmented means that the ability to consolidate the meaning or semantics around that data become very, very critical.
Thanks, Terry. And to keep it with you for a moment, Terry, when you look across government, what are some of the more common misunderstandings that you see from leaders that you're speaking to when it comes to trusting AI and putting their data into more action?
Right. I mean, what with many of the other panelists resonated or said today resonates in the fact that there are trust issues. There are distributed parts of agencies. There are some parts of the government that are distributed, across the U.S. and in some instances, globally. And so this idea of being able to have this autonomous control over your information and share it at the same time becomes, I think it's a challenge that most organizations out in and outside of the government face today. So that is a big one. Certainly the move to cloud and modern infrastructure has made things a little bit more complicated and disparate, right? And so it's kind of like the same challenges we had around analytics when we think about it from a data perspective and sharing perspective. And I think it's just generative AI has just exacerbated that.
Thanks, Harry. Colonel Bottleson, you spoke about trust as well, right? As part of your intro, and when we spoke earlier this week, you talked about it a bit as well. Where are you seeing some of the I guess thinking about the mission stack perspective, where are you seeing the most trust issues come up, or where are people being most cautious about their approach with AI?
That's a really good question. I think that for those that aren't familiar with the idea of the mission stack, let me start with that real quick. Is that if we look at a weapon system, is that there is a number of things that all have to line up for it to work. So we start off at the top with the weapon system itself, whatever that happens to be. And then there's the operational technology, the informational technology, the OT, the IT. And then there's the installation critical infrastructure that helps support that. And then there's the defense industrial base that actually goes out and builds it for you, and usually also, in many cases, services it, depending on the contract. To the question of like, where do we see the greatest challenges? I mean, to be truthful, it is across the board. However, I would argue that the defense industrial base itself, because of its motivations for profit and for data protection, have been faster at adopting AI than I would say the Department of War has necessarily. Now, obviously, the Secretary has some is set out a policy that wants to absolutely amplify and advance this as quickly as possible, so that we are at the leading edge of adoption of AI for purposes, whether it be in the weapon system itself or all the way down that stack. However, with that comes a bunch of cybersecurity concerns that go along with that, which is what our office is actually trying to look at as well. But I think there's the added layer, and it was interesting that was brought up when the term was decentralization. And then I immediately went to compartmentalization, and that's something that we deal with quite a bit in our line of work. And by compartmentalization, I also mean security classification. We have systems that are operating at a whole numbers of different levels of classification. So data sharing is probably the core problem of implementing a wide AI solution towards much of anything, because we have to, by the nature of the information, keep it compartmentalized for national security reasons.
Thanks. And Jesse, I saw you nodding along when Colonel was speaking about compartmentalization. Do you want to comment on that? And also, I was going to ask you, I know when we spoke a few days ago or last week, we spoke about adoption, right, from different divisions within HHS or different end users within HHS being a challenge sometimes. So please comment on both.
Yeah, I'm happy to. And I think the Colonel is seeing this from a perspective and in a way that makes total sense, but I just didn't think of. In our context, we think of siloing, and we think of it sometimes less as a necessary thing and more as it's my data, get your hands off my data kind of thing. And I think that can be its own issue, right? The lack of sharing across an entire department or agency. But of course, there are critical and legal and security reasons to keep information compartmentalized, and how you then bring it together to effectively feed into AI and get the outcomes that you're looking for, and then don't let it leak again out of AI is something you have to convince your stakeholders across all of these parts of the agency that they can trust to move forward. So I think that is a big issue with adoption. I think people are also struggling in different parts of HHS with understanding what the value is in their particular job. So having particularly crisp and clear use cases for how they can save time and increase return on investment really does change adoption and accelerate it for the better.
Thanks, Jesse. And Peter, when we spoke the other day, first of all, you talked about kind of the scale of the USPS, and you mentioned that earlier as well. Jesse just mentioned kind of like ROI when it comes to adoption, like somebody kind of really understanding and trusting the outcome for themselves. For you, thinking about investigations and audits, what happens when people don't trust it and don't operationalize the data? Like, what types of risks would that create for your organization?
I mean, that's a great question in terms of, there's risk no matter what, right? So even if you don't use AI, I mean, the risk is that there might be some cases that just go uninvestigated, and there might be some audits that, maybe miss something. So it really is a mixture, right? It's no kind of charting out the potential solutions, including no path of going forward, right? Like not doing anything about it also creates inherent risk. And so, to us, what really worked is kind of the crawl, walk, run approach. So, kind of like everyone else, here, we all come from very complex organizations, right? I think some parts are maybe more suited than others to undertake an AI project. And we've actually seen successes in specific areas. So there might be on the investigative side, contract fraud that occurs, with vendors of USPS or even involving employees of USPS that happen, because the investigators are some, have a real problem, a concrete problem they come to us with. Same on the audit side, they might come to us with a very concrete ask for a specific audit with specific kind of data in mind. But usually those are really great starting points because it's really those practical day-to-day questions that people have, in doing their job. They need to have some access to data, right? So they understand, I mean, there is all of the, we're talking about the data security and access that not everybody has maybe the same, need to know and level of access, but nevertheless, they come to us with a very specific business kind of question that we are able to solve through a kind of crawl, walk, run approach. So starting small, finding some insights, proving that it works on a small scale, and then expanding if need be. And one of the things, I'm very grateful, for the leadership that we do have, all the way up to the Inspector General Tammy Hall, who are very invested in AI, right? So our leaders, they understand that the AI doesn't come, risk free, and obviously there's a huge cost involved. They understand that those are extremely tough decisions to make, but at the same time, they see the value, they recognize the value in kind of smaller projects, and then really being able to see the potential of how to scale up different solutions.
Thanks, Peter. To pause for a moment, we're going to go ahead and post the first poll question for our audience to answer. So everyone, please fill out the poll question. Again, that's necessary for CPE credits. We're kind of starting to move from the identification of the problem towards the solution now, right? And we're transitioning nicely into, okay, so now what, right? So Terry, from your perspective and thinking about enterprise architecture, what foundational data backbones must be in place before AI can deliver measurable value, and how do you advise and coach your customer base to prioritize, identify the right places to start?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times it comes with, and I think Peter mentioned it, this idea of understanding and starting within a scope, a narrowed scope, with the idea that things evolve over time, and so the idea of iteration is one that is very typical for such projects. What we typically work with customers is around this idea of making information available based off of agency or organizational language, and the idea of having universal semantics so that when it comes to delivering information to consumers, everybody has an understanding with it within the vocabulary of the organization. I mean, that's in my perspective, that's a very big deal. When I was working with on a project with a previous employer, that was kind of where things started, right? When you're working with people that are artificial intelligence researchers, the last thing you want them to do is have to worry about a lot of the wrangling or bringing information together, even working on the security behind it. You want them to be able to focus on bringing value to the project in that space, right? And so there's this idea of delivering information based off of how everyone can understand it, which gives a foundation for broadening innovation and growth and exploration throughout the rest of the organization as well.
Thanks, Terry. And Colonel Bottleson, you mentioned earlier today, and then when we spoke the other day as well, trust but verify, right? So how does that tie to the idea of starting small and then scaling from there? Talk a little bit about how you combine those two things, and what does that look like when it comes to influencing mission decisions?
Sure. Yeah, and you said it very well. It is all about starting small and building those small wins as quickly as you can. And for a number of areas in it, we've kind of touched on this idea of just about the trust piece of it, is especially within military operations when we're dealing with, in many cases, life and death decisions. It's keeping the human on the loop, and not out of the loop by any means right now. Right now it's a human in the loop type of approach, but as we start to adopt more and more AI tools to help to help us understand the operating environment that we're in and what those decisions are in front of us is they can be decision enablers and decision assists. But at the end of the day, it's still a human that's making the decision whether to strike a target or to not strike a target. Um, and so, I'm not sure, where how fast that's going to evolve over time. It goes towards the if how many test cases that we can get in a matter of time and who the vendors are. Um, but I think that one of the things is that we're not immediately going to jump to this whole turn over the keys to the kingdom. And if you look at even any of the other industry out there, so take the airlines for example, is many of the aircraft that fly today can fly themselves more or less, but there's still a human in the cockpit, especially when we're dealing with passengers. Um, I don't think until you start to see that shift away from that type of modality that you're going to see much of a change within the Department of War either.
Thanks. And Jesse, we spoke about how the rubric is changing, I think is the way you described it, right? When it comes to um, identifying which programs to prioritize, and how do you manage that at scale across an agency like HHS?
Yeah, I mean, it's a definite challenge to think about um, the adoption of these tools across a variety of different programs that touch all different parts of the health and human services sector. They each have their own, bespoke needs. I agree with the points that have been made so far, right? Think about piloting small, narrow scope, having metrics of success that you can look to. I mean, in healthcare in particular, the consequences also can be life or death, and it's really important that you know exactly what your risk management strategy is and how you can fail fast with some of these small pilots and then iterate, as Terry was getting at, to scale up for the ones that are most meaningful. I think there's some top-down work and bottom-up work that can be done across the agency in this regard, which is to say, we have champions across our various different divisions who, build grassroots efforts and small pilots, bring the ideas from that perspective. We also need to be thinking top down from the vision and strategy, which we have put out to align around common use cases and decide how we can develop enterprise tools and have a central sort of control over those in order to get the best for the most. So smattering of different ways of doing it, but coming at it from all sides seems to be the way.
Yeah, thanks, Jesse. We'll go ahead and post the second poll as well, but Terry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to just add one thing. So, in one of the projects that I, worked with, and it was iterative. We iterated over the course of a year. But one thing that's very interesting about that iteration is to making sure that expectations are set for each iteration. Because as you iterate, things change, and people's expectations of how things work and how things are going to grow and move forward. That becomes particularly critical as part of a change management activity. Just want to make sure I shared that.
Yeah, thanks, Terry. And I think that kind of brings up the topic of workforce development, right, as well. So, and that's kind of come up a few times throughout this. So, does anyone want to make any comments on what you've seen as best practices in terms of workforce development, whether from top down or bottom up, to make sure that expectations are appropriate, make sure everybody's comfortable with what you're pursuing? Anybody want to start for me there? Peter, go ahead.
Sure. Yeah. So, it's a great question. And actually, at our OIG, we, I think, spend a lot of time doing training and upskilling. And so that has many components to it. So one I would say is really trying to raise sort of the baseline AI literacy and data literacy. So we've developed actually an internal data literacy program that new employees and new managers and others take, but also subscribe to some of these platforms, like for example LinkedIn Learning and others, where they offer quite a bit of learning experiences, giving people credit for taking online classes, and just really bringing the baseline up in terms of how to even use AI tools, or work with data, and making sure how do you trust and validate, how do you deal with data security, things like that. On our side, in risk, which is the analytics and research component, we spent also a lot of time going much more in depth, and that to me is often attending conferences, or actually meeting with vendors of technologies that we use or are interested in, because those bring up new experience. Going to an IT conference, I think is if you've been, you know exactly the kind of atmosphere that there's a lot of learning, meeting new people, learning, meeting vendors who are in the space, meeting other agencies who are in the space. So really cultivating that knowledge through kind of ongoing relationships, and conferences are a key part of that. And then the third thing is, so it was more about, now I'm forgetting exactly what I was going to say, but yes, it's both kind of in-depth knowledge. It's taking classes, but it's also now I remember, it's our internal work, right, on how do we, so we as the analytics team build products. So we build web apps, dashboards, AI models, any of those tools. We must provide some sort of education, or basic change management, right? That people need to know how to use a tool. So if I am an AI developer, and others are developing products that actually use AI, we need to make sure that education piece and that documentation is very thorough. So the education is usually in the forms of working with the customer, the end user directly. That's how it works for us. But it could be any number of things, like writing down documentation, or recordings, or anything like that. So I would say it's kind of that three-tier strategy that we look at in terms of upskilling.
Thanks, Peter. And Colonel Bottleson, passing over to you, and thinking about this idea of workforce development, but also just collaboration. As you've moved around in your career, how do you transition best practices that you've developed to the new places you're going to work, while also collaborating with your new team and adopting what they have in place already? How do you manage and balance that?
So one of the benefits of being in the military is it's unbelievably structured. So we have a lot of regulations, we have everything documented, and we have checklists for darn near everything. So it's a lot of read a step, do a step, eat a banana. I've been done a number of jobs that require that, because I mean, I don't mean to be pejorative when I say this, but we don't have all PhDs in the military. We need to be able to execute a mission, and execute a mission very quickly, with little deviation, if any at all. My first job within intercontinental ballistic missiles, nuclear weapons, there is no room for deviation from that. That is very structured and very regimented, and highly checklist oriented. You do not go outside the checklist. So when it comes to collaboration, well, for codifying or for documenting things, that is the primary method of which our organization does that. When we start talking about collaboration, that becomes another matter, though, because you have, even within the military, these stovepipes of culture that exist within, whether it be for a artillery versus infantry versus ICBMs. It's different, different vernacular, different phrases that people will use. So collaboration can be a little bit different when you're all kind of speaking the same language, but you're also not. And you could argue that it's almost more exacerbated by the number of acronyms that we have, and how many acronyms mean different things in different organizations. So collaboration itself can be a little bit more challenging. Now, when we get to AI, that again could have some challenges with it if it's now, in the worst cases of putting something out there that means something to someone, but it doesn't mean it to the other person. And then you get a lot of mistakes that can potentially occur. So we just have to be very mindful of that as we start to adopt some of these practices.
Thanks, Carolyn. Terry, question for you. When it comes to the contractor government agency partnership, where does workforce development come to play there, or how do you have to educate? But then also, when deploying AI in mission critical environments, what's required from that relationship perspective in order for there to be the right amount of trust from the customer?
Very, very good question. I'm just gonna take it from a general perspective, right? And so from my perspective, and what I have observed through across a cross section of customers, right, is this idea of putting people where they're best suited, right? And that means breaking up or modularizing our technology and our responses similarly, right? So, for instance, I was working with or speaking with one, I don't know what part of the defense industry was, but this person was in charge of developing AI. And some of the challenges, for instance, he had was this inability to focus on that activity because of extraneous things like finding where things are, trying to, to assimilate information across different sources, right? And we see this in commercial industries as well. And so the idea behind that is how do you separate responsibilities so that things come together in predictable fashion? And then I think this also speaks to, what the colonel mentioned about people being able to almost predict how they're going to work, things be regimented, things be consistent, things be simple for people to understand. And I think that's based off how we organize our projects or the resources around our project, how we organize the technology choices that we use and the capabilities that we leverage for those, so that we have this almost modular approach to development and assimilating projects.
Great answer. Thanks, Terry. And Jesse, you mentioned earlier a little bit about shared services. I know when we spoke, you mentioned one HHS, right? Moving away from the decentralization, trying to do more with shared services. Do you want to share with the audience some of the things that you and your team have been working on there?
Yeah, absolutely. I think in an effort to grab a hold of all the IT across HHS, we are trying to first understand and have visibility of that. You can think of it similarly to data, right? Having the visibility helps you understand what you can use it for. And then once you get there, you start to see that a lot of folks are trying to do the same thing or similar things, similar enough in any case. And when it comes down to it, there are better options than subdivisions, each purchasing something that's 98% similar to each other, and the redundancy and wastefulness of taxpayer dollars that ensues. So what we have been looking towards is what we are calling a one HHS approach. It's it is a vision that imparts strategy, right? And that strategy has the purpose of streamlining the tech that we have on board, so that we can, develop and impart the culture change towards adoption, right? But also so that we can more effectively and efficiently use our resources. And I think this also can lead to increased collaboration and synergy across the disparate parts of HHS by enabling, again, the visibility and the common goals that we have, and sharing best practices, lessons learned in utilizing the common systems and tools that we have at our helm.
Thanks, Jesse. Peter, you spoke about the AI Council and an AI impact team. Do you want to share that dynamic with the audience?
Sure, yeah. So this is something we've implemented in our agency that has worked that I think speaks to some of the discussion around, how do you leverage kind of either top down or across the organization. And that's through our AI Council and AI Impact team. So the AI Council is the senior executive level meeting that focuses on how are we leveraging AI throughout the agency at a very high kind of strategic level. So we look for things like the council looks at, um, where are there the most opportunities, the risks, where do they have to make decisions on either procuring or building technologies. So we do a lot, again, a kind of a mixture of either buying or building our own tools. Um, and of course, budgetary decisions are a part of that, right? You can't really build AI without a budget. That definitely is a big part of that, I would say. But it's also a way to kind of send communications, like how does the agency actually want to communicate around AI? And so, from the very beginning, what I've been really impressed by is the AI Council made it very apparent that AI is not something to be feared, right? That it's not something that we will just block all of the access to AI. We made it kind of very strategic in the sense of giving everyone some tools. So, for example, Microsoft Copilot has been rolled out. Anyone in the agency can use it, as well as more sophisticated AI tools that we also use for specific purposes. But all of that has been kind of under this overall green light, trust but verify, but overall, optimistic stance that I think that the AI in general could help us, with the right solutions. Again, as long as we are managing the risk and addressing all of those challenges accurately. So that's on the AI Council side. On the AI Impact side, that's more of the working group level. And what is super important is, we have kind of like what Jesse was suggesting with multiple teams working on similar projects. That happens a lot. You can imagine that across investigations and audits, like there are common themes that emerge, even though the scope of each one is different. It's an opportunity for people, the participants in that group to really come together, kind of collaborate with their own component, get a shared understanding of what are the key priorities in the projects that are needed, and hopefully finding a way to enable some of these projects. So the AI impact team itself doesn't necessarily enable these projects, but they're the ones that kind of cohesively, are able to put together the list of project and identify these are the really where the agency is heading and informing the AI Council. So that dynamic has been working for us. I think we still have a lot to do moving forward and solving a lot of potential gaps and inefficiencies. But the fact that we already have a governance structure, I think speaks a lot as to what we're trying to do in the agency.
Thanks, Peter. Peter, you mentioned budgets. Jesse, you mentioned shared services and costs as tied to that. And obviously everybody has budgets. So I'll open it for Colonel Bottleson or Terry. Do you have any comments around how you kind of balance and prioritize, right? Everybody has budgets, so they have to worry about when they're making decisions here. How does that come into play? It's obviously something that we try to avoid making the decisions for us, but how do you prioritize? How do you balance that? Anybody have any comments related to that?
I think if your question is about how we prioritize between the budgets itself, that is in the department is a wicked hard problem to begin with. Everything has ramifications, and it's all about understanding how much risk would be associated with any one of those particular decisions. It is not a limitless pocketbook that any one of our departments ever spends from, and we have to make some really hard choices from time to time. Some people aren't happy with those choices. Are there opportunities where AI can help us understand what those those second, third order effects, or maybe even fourth, fifth order effects are, yeah, absolutely. I think that's something that as we look towards developing or determining what the force of the future needs to look like and the complex set of adversaries that we may have to encounter is it'll allow us to better understand the trade space that we have to operate in to build the right equipment such that it's not building for the last war is to use kind of a colloquialism of it is it, it does me no good to go build a Liberty ship from World War II when that's not what I need to counter a Taiwan invasion. Um, it also can AI in particular, especially if we spend it and we develop it the right ways to help us war game out scenarios. I think that's one of those things that we can only run so many different perturbations of something before we just run out of time. And I think one of the areas where this can really help us is to understand in all of the eventual futures that could occur is in all the different variables is that what is the most likely, most dangerous situations that we could deal with, and then we can work to combat within that and try to neck down the amount of variability that we may see with anything. But again, without the budgets to support that and making those right choices, is none of this happens.
Thanks. And then we can go ahead and post a third poll question for the audience as we're getting near the end of the session here today. So then thinking about the future now, right? And maybe Terry, you could start with us here. Based upon your experience, what do you expect to change when it comes to artificial intelligence and this shift from big data to actionable intelligence within government agencies again over the next couple of years?
Well, I mean, I think that the thrust or the trend around LLMs is going to continue to some degree, and I think that there may be some technologies that are adjacent to that. But I think that for the next 2 to 3 years, we will be focused on those, and over the past few years, we've gotten better or more understanding as to how to actually interact with them. I think as a result with that, then, and I think the Colonel said it, quite well when he was talking about this idea of meaning and different people's understanding of the same things, right? And so I think that thrust around how we position information is going to be the way to capture how we can present meaning and all of the subtleties around how it's understood going forward. And so I think the next year or so is going to be much more concentration around that aspect of it. We certainly see many organizations moving more towards trying to present meaning or trying to model it and present it so that it's unified. The idea of universal, I think, and I think the Colonel made that point, is kind of interesting. But the idea of being able to leverage things and reason over them so that understanding is known is where things are going.
Thanks, Harry. Colonel, back over to you with the same question. What are you expecting to see change or develop in the next couple of years?
I think there's going to be better adoption of it. I think one of the things that would definitely look for within is education and understanding of it. It was brought up earlier as the idea of literacy. Many people don't have that within any arena right now. It's all very, very new. It's like cavemen learning how to play with fire right now, and it can be very dangerous if it's not used properly. You don't want to throw gasoline on it, but I think that not only the education within the next couple of years, but I think that the baby steps of this is starting to gain some efficiencies, especially within large bureaucracies. I happen to be part of one of them, and the amount of time and effort that's spent on producing PowerPoint slides or synthesizing paperwork is just, I mean, the number of person hours, man hours that are used to do this is just abhorrent. And so I think those small steps of starting to adopt that allows us to start thinking about some other things that we really should be able to think about instead of being bogged down by the mundane day-to-day things that just kind of make us hate our lives and our jobs.
Great answer. Jesse, over to you with the same question. What are you expecting to see change over the next couple of years?
Yeah, I'm just really excited and optimistic. I share the sentiment that Peter's leadership is disseminating. Especially in the healthcare industry, there's just so much opportunity here, and the change is happening so rapidly. So when I think about internally to the Department of Health and Human Services, I see the same thing as the Colonel was describing in terms of increased uptake and adoption for decreased administrative burden and paperwork. We're all tired of that pushing, and the more we can streamline that, the better. Um, and and then I had this other view towards thinking about how AI could be used in a clinic and what it could mean for, you know, chronic disease in this country and what it could mean for, decisions happening in emergency rooms in real time. There's just so much opportunity. And so I see a lot of work to try to create the trust necessary and the sort of ethical, legal, and frameworks that you need in order to enable these advances in the technology at the front lines in healthcare. So just really excited.
Great answer, Jesse. Peter, same question over to you, and then we'll look to wrap up shortly after.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think those are all great answers. To me, a lot of it is sort of the mindset shift in the sense of, it hopefully will not be as big of a novelty, right? So today we use the smartphone. You probably don't even count how many times you pick up your smartphone or how many emails you get a day. So in the same way that, we've kind of adopted and got used to, things like the internet, email, social media, smartphones, I think that, baseline AI tools will also be sort of in the same venue that you'll be able to interact with a chatbot or, what used to take hours, for example, PowerPoint presentations or in the data analytics world, right? Writing long queries, things where that might be more tedious. Those things hopefully will be more streamlined, where we actually spend more time doing things that maybe we didn't have time to think about before. I also am really excited just about some of the other, Terry mentioned this, the kind of adjacent technologies. So, we're kind of in the intersection of, law enforcement and audit, but also the logistics industry and postal delivery. You can imagine with, things like robotics coming out, and Internet of Things, there will be more and more advances where the mail will go through faster and quicker. Sorting will be, we already have advancements in sorting, but things like, really keeping track of the delivery processing pipeline, I think we will see advances in those. Now, with those advances will also come new challenges, because we are kind of in the business of overseeing fraud. Fraud will always be there. I don't think that these advancements will mean necessarily that it'll be kind of 100% efficient and fraud free. In fact, there'll be new threats that we have to assess and deal with. But again, overall, I tend to be on a very kind of optimistic side, thinking that we will really learn to embrace the use of AI.
Thanks, Peter. And only a few minutes left here, so I'll let each of the panelists give a quick parting thought, last piece of advice for the audience, and I think we'll have time. We have three pretty good questions, and we'll run through quickly at the end. But Colonel Bottleson, do you mind starting off with the final thoughts for our audience?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, thanks for the opportunity and thanks to all the panelists that were on here. I think it's been a fantastic discussion and it's really exciting. I think AI itself is very exciting and the prospects that it has ahead of it are very exciting. It's also scary to many. But it's also necessary. And from my department's standpoint, it's absolutely necessary because at the end of the day, speed wins. And if there's things especially in modern warfare, if there's things that can help us do faster, quicker, and more lethal, then that's what we need to do to be able to stay ahead of our adversaries. And we cannot let the adversaries get a foothold over us in this particular area. We can't afford to do that. So I would leave it pretty much with that. So again, thanks again for this, and it's been fun.
Thank you, sir. Jesse, over to you. Final thoughts.
Yeah, I'll echo some of what the Colonel was saying. I think, get excited with and yes, it can be scary for a variety of reasons. There was a quote from one of the godfathers of AI, how AI would replace all radiologists by this time, and as it turns out, that is not at all the case. But there's another quote from my current leadership, who is a radiologist, and he said that I don't think AI will replace me, but a doctor using AI will. And so that fits in line with what the Colonel is saying. Get curious, right? Find a friend who is using this stuff and enjoying it, and play around. Peer-to-peer learning works really well here. Be curious, but also be critical. The points that many of the panelists have made, and it's been a great pleasure to be on with all of you, and thank you for the opportunity here, James. But the fact of the matter is that a human still needs to be in the loop, and that human is you in many of these cases, and you should look at what the outputs of these things are and make sure it says what you want it to say, or is conveying what you want it to convey, because you're still the human that's responsible.
Thanks, Jesse. Peter, over to you.
So yeah, great panel, first of all, and thank you so much. It's really interesting that even though I think we're all kind of in different areas of work, just how much intersections we have in terms of, the challenges and opportunities in terms of the data sharing and the privacy, security, and challenges. One of the things, I mean, we've talked a lot, and I see there's also a question about just how do you ensure that AI results are to be trusted? And I think actually this kind of the tail end, right? The Colonel Belson, you added, you started the conversation with trust but verify, right? Trusting is super important, and that is a huge issue of trust. And I think for each area it's different. So in our agency, it's audit and investigations. On the investigation side, I would say that's actually in some ways it's easier, right? Because there are still investigators in the loop who follow the chain of custody, who follow well-known, recognized practices. They follow all of the best standards on how to be a criminal investigator. It gets turned over. Some of these cases become DOJ cases, in the sense, right, that there's a U.S. attorney that takes them on. It becomes a federal case. So all of that is already part of the process. What we are doing is really enabling the insights, pointing that, hey, you might want to take a look at these, being proactive in giving the insights to investigators to do their job more efficiently, and also pointing to things where they might not have been aware of before. On the audit side, I recognize it's tougher. I'm not an auditor myself, so it's hard to speak to specific kind of audit principles. I think with audit, what makes it a little bit more difficult is that the responses often have to be, exactly, they have to match the standards and the procedures that you have. And it's the AI will not be 100% accurate ever. It's going to get things wrong. But I think that with context engineering, with being able to provide the right context and examples, and really show the work process, that's the beginning, right? So a lot of it is sort of taught by example. A lot of us are using LLMs, large language models, and foundation models that can do a lot of heavy duty work, but even those models often have to be either fine-tuned or just supplemented by lots of examples. So I think it's through that process that we'll get there, on the audit side, and also the investigative side.
Thanks, Peter, and thanks for answering one of the questions in your wrap up. Terry, over to you for final thoughts for the audience.
Yeah, and I'm definitely going to take this from an architectural perspective, right? And so I think that we have definitely learned a lot over the past couple of years as to how LLMs work, how we need to work with them, how we need to stage information or model information in order to provide them, to help them become more accurate, particularly within the context of our organizations. I believe that strategically looking at it from a higher level as to how it aligns with our vision and how we can move forward and support our organizations through different aspects of it, support, validation, and all of those things matter. But how you structure your organization and the capabilities around that are going to matter more and more. And in order for, particularly when we talk about looking at things at scale, and a lot of the ways that we go about producing these products um, are going to be reevaluated so that scale can happen faster. It's going to be componentized and separated out so that people can build things faster and more securely going forward. This in concert with the idea that the technology is still maturing, as we speak today. There's been reasoning frameworks, whereas 2 years ago there weren't, right? And so there's this idea of things being able to evolve and us just being just keeping in track and online with them, knowing that there's different levels of usage, right? There's the normal consumer who's working with the models directly. There's the programmatic aspect of it. And it's just a matter of looking at the big picture and making sure that you architect your organization, positioning it with the idea that these things are going to change over time, or that they're evolving and maturing over time.
Thanks very much, Torsi and Terry. And unfortunately, we're at time, so I know we have a couple of questions unanswered. For those who asked them, we'll try to collect some answers for you afterwards and correspond via email back to you to get answers for you. I want to thank everybody for joining and participating in the webinar today. Huge thanks to our speakers. Great mix of experiences and backgrounds and thoughts. So really appreciate everybody's time in joining us here today. Special thanks to Denodo, who are our partners for today's webinar. And everybody have a great afternoon. Talk soon.
Thank you. Take care.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.